Hey guys, I'm Anita with Homes by Team Hale at Moore Realty in Central Oregon. It is the Monday of New Year's. Are you ready for 2026? I'm not. This is the time of year I normally get in here and I relay the information I've learned in the last few weeks from people smarter than I am about what we foresee happening in the next year and kind of help you get some direction in how to plan your real estate transactions should you intend to do so in 2026. And by golly, I think the biggest challenge for me in this season of my real estate career is creating clarity in a place where things are just so unclear. I have sat in continuing education classes in the last few weeks where in one class they provide a laundry list of things that are expected to transpire in 2026 and how they will be a boon for real estate and really help drive forward strength in our housing markets nationwide. And then I sit in a class a few hours later that provides that exact same laundry list, and they talk about how these could be challenges to real estate and to the housing markets. So I I will say this because I have yet again had this question several times recently. I do not think there will be a crash. Saying a slowing or a little bit of a constriction or hesitancy in the buyer pool does not mean crash. I think that we're a little trigger happy with that. I think that we still have some 2008 back like whiplash where if anybody says I am concerned about pricing going forward, the instant response is, well, we're not going to crash. Well, but that's not what I'm saying. I want to make smart choices. And that's my goal, is to really help my clients make smart choices for themselves and their housing, since this is one of our basic needs, um, so that they're set up for success over the next few years. So there's been so much clickbait news. I mean, it's from everything from this Zillow situation where they were doing the direct buy and got left holding a bag of millions of dollars of property, billions of dollars of property that now they just can't resell. They're selling things below value. They're getting foreclosed on. And then also all of these, it's a little crazy right now. If you pull up the housing news, and at the same time, Bend being so desirable in the last few weeks, because this is the time of year you start seeing the best of lists. If we weren't on the list before, we are on the list now. And if we were on the list before, we've moved up in ranking. And that also is really interesting. You know, everything from Dogtown to lifestyle to mountain town to beer scene to upcoming rest. I mean, Bend has been on so many lists in the last few months. It's a little crazy, which just drives that visibility for Central Oregon and the desirability for a region that is already feeling the crunch of housing. Yes, we were building a lot of houses, but we are also still not having enough housing for the people who just work the everyday world here. One of the things that came up in the news that I don't think a lot of people noticed, so I wanted to mention it here, was this event a couple of weeks ago where the Federal Reserve went ahead and reappointed their 11 regional bank presidents. This was a unanimous vote, and the vote was held early. The financial world seems to relay the message that this was done early because of the pressure from the president on the Federal Reserve and on Jerome Powell, and the whiplash of fire him, leave him in turn, appoint, let him finish his term. His term is up next year. The Federal Chair Reserve, Jerome Powell will move out of his position in the new year. But this secures these other people that are on the panel. So when you hear the media say the Federal Reserve voted to drop, hold interest rates, these are the guys that vote. These are the other 11 guys that vote. The messaging from these bank presidents, regional bank presidents, has been hesitancy to reduce interest rates in the new year. There is a lot of pressure from the federal government to do that, to reduce interest rates. And the assumption is that whoever the president appoints into the federal chair position, that person will be pushing to drop interest rates. So this feels like a little bit of the attempt by the Federal Reserve to put kind of a barricade against rampant policy change within the Federal Reserve under pressure, because these folks have been there. They've been watching this happen. They've been watching the media and the economy and stuff for a while, and they're not new, and their intentions are already well stated. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. The first 6 months of 2026 are going to be really interesting from the economic standpoint, whether or not the hopes that things will improve, inflation improves, all of these things improve, and then potentially the Fed goes, okay, we've seen that soft landing, things are okay. Will we reduce interest rates? It's all going to be very interesting. I do think that if they hadn't done this and potentially some of these positions were changed under pressure, outside pressure, and rates had significantly dropped suddenly in the new year after the appointment of the new Fed chair, that would have been a formula for some real difficulties in the housing market, akin to what we saw as interest rates came down during the pandemic and prices skyrocketed up, and just that affordability equation getting so out of balance. So, as you guys know, I like my data. So, this is where we're at. As I've shown before, this is my numbers on this data set are month to month. So if I'm looking at it throughout the month, each month it will renew, but it's not going to renew middle of the month. I keep getting questions about market crash. Will the realist, like, how big of a drop, how much of a crash are we expecting? And I think this is a really hard conversation to have. I've mentioned this before. If the real estate markets crash, the people who are asking me when it's going to crash aren't going to be able to buy a house, because there are additional factors that come into play when that transpires. We don't want to crash. I do think that the market will continue to soften and that prices might come down a little bit. But unfortunately, the 2 to 4% that it may come down also doesn't necessarily help those people who are asking for the crash. So I've said this for the last couple of years, and I'll say it again this year, at least for the next 6 months. If your plan is not to be in Central Oregon long term, 3 to 5 years at the most, if you don't plan to be here 5 years or longer, I would say if you're in a rental, stay in a rental. The formula for rentals in Central Oregon makes it so very expensive to buy a home versus renting. This is a hard one because it's done as a percentage. Where's my buy versus rent differential? So the higher the number, the more expensive it is to buy versus rent. So that's rough. We're looking at buy versus rent in the 97701. Your typical house payment for the mortgage total for that year would be about $50,000, but your apartment rent would be $26,000. You've got a 55 in 02 versus 28. And oof, you've got a typical house payment of $80,000 a year in 03, and your apartment rent might be $30,000. So this is why I sit here and say, I know you want to have a dog and a cat. You are concerned about these, the insecurity. You want to be able to paint the walls your own color. I haven't been a tenant in 30 years, so I understand that that's a factor. But economically, right now, unless you are planning to be here longer term, going ahead and staying in a rental might be your best bet currently. Some of the other data that's really interesting to look at is that this is the reduction in pricing that we have seen year over year for the last year. it's pretty minimal. 3 to 4% isn't going to massively impact your mortgage payment if you are purchasing a home. So, additionally, when we look at the forecast, where's my forecast number? It's up here. The way they have this set up, I haven't fully gotten locked in yet. Our forecast number is, again, to have a little bit of a reduction in home pricing, but it's not going to be hugely impactful. So if you are going to be here for 5 years or longer, getting into a home creates that stability and that security. Just bear in mind that we have come down in price and we might go down a little bit more. So if it's a fully finished, ready to sell, no improvements needed type of house, maybe seeing if you can get the house for a little bit less than home value. That doesn't necessarily mean list price. And this is where you got to really partner with a good real estate agent who's going to really dig into the comps for you and give you a really clear idea of, if this were my listing, this is where I would think it would sell based on the other houses that have sold. And then maybe say, okay, let's see where the seller's at. Let's see if we can offer a smidge below that number. People ask me all the time, like, since the peak, we've lost so much value in Central Oregon, but we really haven't. We've lost 6 to 10%. That's not a huge reduction in price considering how much we gained during the pandemic, because home value growth over the last 5 years is still significantly in the positive. We're still 38, 36, 39% appreciation over the 5 years. And that's taking into consideration that reduction in home prices of the last year. So we got really expensive, and we are still very expensive. That has cooled a little bit, but it's not going to cool a whole lot more. And this is all assuming everything remains kind of stable in the economy. So I don't see a crash coming. I think buying a home right now with a data set and a broker who really knows their stuff is going to be imperative. Selling a home, being mindful of the condition of your home, and being open-minded with buyers is also going to be imperative. Obviously, I'm not going to suggest that you list your house taking into consideration future depreciation, because, again, we are in unclear times. Things are unprecedented. We don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. But I do think that, I was doing a pre-listing walkthrough the other day and was asked about replacing the carpet that was lived on, but not horrendous. There were no holes. It didn't really even have a lot of wear stain. It's just lived in. And I said, let's get it shampooed and see how it looks. And then take that into consideration with our pricing when we're ready to sell. If you have the ability to improve a property, then yeah, maybe there's going to be some great return on that investment. It may just be getting your property to the price that you need it to be in order to get the return on the sale you want, but you're spending money going into that. So bear that in mind. If you're not in the position to make improvements, be open-minded about pricing. Go get those estimates. You're not going to replace your roof, but you know it's due. Go get the estimates for that roof. Go get the estimates for sprinklers in your yard. If you don't have sprinklers, but you know that's going to be something that buyers are going to want because you have a lot of lawn. Those sorts of things just really help kind of drive the buyer, their knowledge, and makes them feel more comfortable with the purchase of a home in the current environment we're in. So my suggestion for the next year in real estate is make sure you're working with someone who digs into the data and has the knowledge of what's going on. Make sure you're working with someone who is not driven by their own personal gains of the income, but really is advocating and driving for your financial success in the future. And don't be upset when that broker says, I'm looking at your overall situation and maybe we should wait 6 months. Because 6 months from now, with the lack of clarity we have, everything could be really different. And then stay in touch with that broker, because there will be signals in the next few months if things are going to escalate or draw back. We will start to see that unravel and unfold as we get into 2026. So, I hope this is helpful. I might not be back before the end of the year to do another one of these. These videos right now are just kind of inspired by when I'm hearing news or when I'm in conversations with other people. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I commented on my concern of potential slowing, some price reductions in a market. And they said, well, we're not going to crash. And I'm like, I didn't say crash. I'm just trying to guard my investment and be knowledgeable and reasonable and smart the way I step into it. And we're too quick to assume it's either increase or crash. There is a middle ground. And I think working with someone who's willing to acknowledge your concerns and help to work with you so that you feel comfortable with where you're going with your investment is really imperative these days. So, anyways, I hope you have an amazing day. Have a very happy New Year's Eve. Stay safe if I don't see you again between now and then. And if I don't, I'll see you in the new year.